The forgotten letter, Olivia Russell smoothed the wrinkles from her white blouse and checked her watch for the third time. The coffee shop buzzed with mid-morning energy, but she barely registered the chatter around her. 8 years. 8 years since she'd last seen Thomas Hadley. 8 years since she'd discovered she was pregnant. 2 weeks after he'd left for what was supposed to be a temporary position abroad. The letter she'd written him sat unopened in her desk drawer at home. She'd never sent it, never told him about Charlotte. More coffee? The barista's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "No, thank you," Olivia replied, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her half-empty cup. Through the window, autumn leaves danced across the sidewalk of their small coastal town, Millhaven. When Olivia's friend Denise had mentioned Thomas was back in town, something had shifted inside her. Not the old love that had transformed long ago into something different, but a heavy responsibility. Charlotte deserved to know her father, and Thomas deserved to know about Charlotte. "Mommy!" Charlotte's voice rang out as her daughter burst through the door, followed by Olivia's sister Beatrice, who had picked her up from school. At 7 years old, Charlotte was all gangly limbs and curious eyes, Thomas's eyes, unmistakably blue against her dark curls. "Hey, sunshine," Olivia said, pulling Charlotte into a hug. "How was school?" "Ms. Patterson let me read my story to the whole class." Charlotte beamed, her gap-toothed smile revealing a recently lost incisor. Everyone clapped, even Grumpy Jackson. Beatrice slid into the chair beside Olivia, eyebrows raised in silent question. "Did you decide yet?" Olivia gave a small nod. "Can we go to the Harvest Festival this weekend?" Charlotte asked, already distracted by the display of pastries. "Lily said they're having a pumpkin carving contest." "Of course," Olivia said, though her mind was elsewhere. The Harvest Festival had always been Thomas's favorite event. His family had run the cider press for generations before selling the orchard and moving away. Now he was back, and the timing seemed like more than coincidence. That evening, after tucking Charlotte into bed, Olivia retrieved the yellowed envelope from her desk. The address in London was long outdated, but the words inside remained true. She had written it during a sleepless night when Charlotte was just a newborn, trying to make sense of her choices. "Dear Thomas, there's someone you should meet. She has your eyes and your laugh." The doorbell rang, startling her. Through the peephole, she saw Beatrice clutching her phone. "He's here," Beatrice said without preamble when Olivia opened the door. "Thomas, I saw him at the grocery store. He asked about you." Olivia's legs weakened. "What did you say?" "Nothing about Charlotte. Just that you still lived here. That you were well." Beatrice hesitated. "Liv, he's going to find out eventually. Millhaven isn't that big." Olivia sank onto the couch, the letter still in her hands. "I know. I've been thinking about it all day." "What are you afraid of?" The question hung in the air. What was she afraid of? That Thomas would be angry? That he would want nothing to do with Charlotte? Or worse, that he would try to take her daughter away? "I'm afraid of disrupting Charlotte's life," Olivia finally said. "She's happy. We're happy." Beatrice sat beside her, taking the letter gently. Sometimes the right thing and the easy thing aren't the same. Upstairs, Charlotte's nightlight cast star-shaped patterns across the ceiling of her bedroom. Olivia stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep. Tomorrow they would go to the park as planned, their weekly tradition. She would tell Charlotte stories about the constellations as they always did, pointing out Ursa Major and Cassiopeia, and somewhere in Millhaven, Thomas Hadley was looking at the same night sky, unaware that his daughter could name every star in it. Olivia decided then, after the park, she would find Thomas, before chance did it for her. Recognition. The Millhaven Harvest Festival transformed the town square into a tableau of autumn splendor. Olivia helped Charlotte button her rust-colored cardigan as they walked through rows of vendor stalls, selling everything from hand-dipped candles to maple candy. The air smelled of cinnamon, wood smoke, and the distinctive tang of apples being pressed into cider. "Can we get caramel apples?" Charlotte tugged at Olivia's hand, pointing toward a booth where glossy red fruits rotated on sticks, being dipped into bubbling copper pots. "After the pumpkin carving," Olivia promised, though her attention kept drifting to the faces in the crowd. Was Thomas here? Would she recognize him after 8 years? They settled at a hay bale table in the children's area. Charlotte selected a medium-sized pumpkin and began sketching her design with a marker while Olivia helped set up their carving tools. The festival bustled around them, children laughing, folk music drifting from the bandstand, the occasional announcement crackling through speakers. "I'm making a cat," Charlotte declared, her tongue poking between her lips in concentration. "With whiskers like Mr. Pemberton's." Olivia smiled at the mention of their elderly neighbor's fluffy Maine Coon. "That's perfect. Need help with the tricky parts?" "I can do it," Charlotte insisted, her independence a trait she'd shown since toddlerhood. Another quality inherited from her father. Olivia was reaching for a paper towel when she heard a voice that made her freeze mid-motion. "Welcome everyone to the 32nd annual cider pressing." The voice, deeper than she remembered, but unmistakably his, came through the speakers. "I'm Thomas Hadley, and my family started this tradition back when we owned Hadley Orchards. I'm honored to be back this year as a guest judge for the cider competition." Charlotte looked up from her pumpkin. "Why are you making that face, Mom?" Before Olivia could answer, a cheer went up from the crowd as the ceremonial first pressing began. People shifted toward the central pavilion, creating a clear line of sight between their table and the wooden platform where Thomas stood next to Mayor Richardson, turning the large wheel of the antique cider press. 8 years had weathered him in subtle ways, threads of silver at his temples, laugh lines more pronounced around his eyes. But his smile was the same, the way it tilted slightly higher on the left. "Mom, can we go see the cider pressing?" Charlotte was already standing, wiping pumpkin seeds on her jeans. Olivia's mouth went dry. "Let's finish your pumpkin first, sweetie. But everyone's watching, please." Charlotte's blue eyes, Thomas's eyes, widened pleadingly. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay close to me." They joined the crowd surrounding the platform. Thomas was telling a story about the history of the press, gesturing animatedly as golden liquid flowed into waiting barrels. Charlotte pushed forward for a better view, and Olivia followed, heart pounding against her ribs. Thomas's gaze swept over the audience, pausing momentarily on Olivia. A flicker of recognition, then surprise. He faltered mid-sentence, recovered, and finished his demonstration with practiced charm, though his eyes kept returning to where she stood. As the crowd dispersed, Olivia considered retreating to their pumpkin station. But Charlotte was already darting toward the now empty platform where Thomas was gathering his notes. "Your cider press is awesome," Charlotte announced, startling him. "Does it really squish 100 apples at once?" Thomas smiled down at her. "Not quite 100, but pretty close." His eyes lifted to Olivia as she approached, then back to Charlotte. "Are you enjoying the festival?" "Yeah. We're carving pumpkins over there, and my mom promised we could get caramel apples after." Charlotte pointed to their table. "I'm making a cat face." "That sounds excellent." Thomas's voice was warm, but his expression had shifted to something puzzled as he looked more closely at Charlotte. At her eyes, her smile, the dimple in her left cheek. Olivia watched understanding dawn across his face. Surprise, then confusion, then a dawning realization that made his posture stiffen. "Hello, Thomas," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Olivia." He nodded, his gaze moving between her and Charlotte with growing intensity. "It's been a while. Mom, do you know each other?" Charlotte asked, looking between them curiously. Thomas's eyes widened slightly at the word Mom, and Olivia saw his hands tighten around the papers he was holding. "Yes." "Sweetheart, Mr. Hadley and I are old friends." Olivia placed a protective hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "We should get back to our pumpkin before someone takes our spot." "Actually," Thomas said, his voice careful, controlled, "I'd love to see your pumpkin when it's done. Maybe I could stop by?" The question held weighted meaning that passed over Charlotte's head, but landed squarely on Olivia's conscience. "Of course," she answered, writing her phone number on a festival program and handing it to him. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the slight tremor in his hand. "We'll be here all afternoon." As they walked away, Charlotte skipping ahead, Thomas called after them. "How old are you, Charlotte?" Charlotte turned, walking backward. "I'm 7 3/4. My birthday's in January." Olivia watched Thomas do the mental calculation, saw his expression shift as the timeline aligned perfectly with their final summer together. He looked up at her, a silent question in his eyes that demanded an answer. "Come find us later," she said quietly. "We have a lot to talk about." The rest of the afternoon stretched like pulled taffy, slow and tense, as Olivia helped Charlotte finish her pumpkin while watching the crowd for Thomas's approaching figure, knowing that their lives were about to change irrevocably. Fractured reflections. Thomas found them as the festival lights came on at dusk, casting long shadows across the town square. Charlotte was proudly displaying her finished pumpkin, a surprisingly detailed cat face with triangular ears and whiskers carved with meticulous care. "That's impressive work," Thomas said, crouching to examine it at Charlotte's level. "You've got steady hands." "Mom says I get it from drawing all the time," Charlotte replied. Beaming at the compliment, Olivia watched them, noting the identical way they tilted their heads when concentrating. How had she thought she could keep them apart forever? "Charlotte, honey, why don't you take your pumpkin to the judging table? I need to talk with Mr. Hadley for a minute." Charlotte looked between them, clearly picking up on the tension. "Are you fighting?" "No," Thomas answered quickly. "Not at all. Just grown-up talk. Boring stuff," Olivia added with a forced smile. Reluctantly, Charlotte carried her pumpkin toward the judging area, looking back twice before joining the line of other children. As soon as she was out of earshot, Thomas turned to Olivia, his voice low but intense. 7 years old. Born in January. It wasn't a question. Olivia nodded anyway. "She's mine." Again, not a question. Yes. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it ached. "Why didn't you tell me?" The simple question contained multitudes, hurt, anger, confusion, all justified, all anticipated. Olivia had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times, yet now the carefully prepared explanations felt hollow. "You were gone. The London firm offered you a permanent position. You were building the career you'd always wanted." She looked away. "I wrote you a letter but never sent it. By then, months had passed and you'd moved on." "Moved on?" Thomas's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you thought? That I just forgot about you? Your Instagram showed you traveling, dating. You seemed happy. Social media isn't reality, Olivia. You know that." He looked over at Charlotte, who was now chatting animatedly with the pumpkin judge. "She has my eyes, and your dimple, your love of space, your stubbornness." Olivia watched his expression soften. "She's brilliant, Thomas. Curious about everything. Does she know about me at all?" Olivia shook her head. "I told her that her father lived far away. That's all." Thomas absorbed this, his jaw tightening. "I've missed 7 years of her life, I know. And I'm sorry." The inadequacy of the apology hung between them. "Sorry doesn't give me back first words, first steps." His voice cracked. "First days of school." Olivia felt tears threatening. "I made a mistake. I thought I was protecting her, protecting all of us from complications that would only cause pain. That wasn't your decision to make alone." Thomas's anger was controlled but palpable. "I had rights. She had rights to know her father." A burst of applause drew their attention to the judging table, where Charlotte was receiving a blue ribbon for her pumpkin. Her face lit with pride as she searched the crowd for her mother. "She's coming back," Olivia said quickly. "Please, can we not do this here?" Thomas straightened, visibly composing himself. "Fine, but this conversation isn't over." Charlotte ran toward them, ribbon clutched triumphantly. "I won first place in my age group. The judge said my cat had excellent dimension." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Olivia hugged her, grateful for the momentary distraction. Thomas knelt down again. "Congratulations, Charlotte." "That's quite an achievement." Charlotte studied him with newfound interest. "Do you carve pumpkins too?" "I used to. When I was about your age, my father taught me." A shadow crossed his face. Parents are supposed to teach their children things like that. The pointed comment wasn't lost on Olivia, but Charlotte only nodded seriously. "Maybe you could teach me more tricks next year?" Mom's not very good at the details. The innocent suggestion that Thomas would be in their lives a year from now created a strange silence. "I should go," Thomas finally said, standing. I'm staying at the Millhaven Inn, room 212. He directed this to Olivia. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We need to talk properly. After he left, Charlotte tugged at Olivia's sleeve. Why was that man looking at me so funny? Like he knew me. Olivia's heart constricted. He's an old friend who's been away for a long time. He's surprised by how much you've grown up. But he never met me before, Charlotte said with a child's unerring logic. Olivia took a deep breath. Actually, sweetheart, there's something important I need to tell you. But not here. Let's go home. Later that night, after a conversation that began with tears and ended with Charlotte falling asleep clutching a photo of Thomas that Olivia had kept hidden in her dresser drawer, Olivia sat alone on her porch watching the stars emerge. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, possibly legal threats, certainly more pain. But tonight, looking at the same constellations Thomas had once taught her to find, she allowed herself to hope that somehow they might find their way through this fractured reflection of what might have been. Tentative steps. The Millhaven Inn's lobby was deserted at 9 in the morning, save for a sleepy receptionist and a lone figure by the fireplace. Olivia spotted Thomas immediately, his tall frame bent over a laptop, 2 coffee cups on the table beside him. He looked up when the door closed behind her. I got you a latte, he said, gesturing to one of the cups. Still take it with vanilla? The small detail he'd remembered after 8 years caught her off guard. Yes, thank you. They settled into facing armchairs, the crackling fire filling the awkward silence between them. Outside, rain streaked the windows, a gloomy backdrop for the conversation ahead. Where's Charlotte? Thomas asked, closing his laptop. With my sister. I told her I had a meeting. Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm cup. She had a lot of questions last night. I can imagine. His expression softened slightly. How did she take it? Better than I expected, confused, excited, worried. Olivia met his gaze directly. She wants to meet you, properly. Thomas exhaled slowly. I want that too. But first, he reached into his bag and produced a folder. I need to understand everything I've missed. For the next hour, Olivia answered his questions, filling in the gaps of Charlotte's life. Her premature birth, her early affinity for art, her struggle with reading until 2nd grade, her collection of rocks and shells, her love of chocolate ice cream with rainbow sprinkles. With each detail, Thomas's expression cycled between wonder and grief for the moments lost. I have photos, Olivia said finally, pulling out her phone. If you'd like to see them. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. She moved to sit beside him, scrolling through 7 years of memories. Charlotte as a newborn with a shock of dark hair, taking her first steps, riding a tricycle, losing her first tooth, performing in a school play as a tree. She has my mother's smile, Thomas said softly, stopping on a picture of Charlotte blowing out birthday candles. God, Olivia, how could you keep this from me? The question hung between them, laden with hurt. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. I was 23, terrified, and you were building your life across an ocean. By the time I realized I should have told you, it seemed too late. She looked at him directly. It was wrong. I see that now. But I need to know what happens next. Thomas leaned back, his fingers drumming against the armrest. I spent all night researching custody laws. Olivia's stomach dropped. Is that where we're heading, court? I don't know. His honesty was both brutal and refreshing. I've missed 7 years. I don't want to miss another day. Are you moving back to Millhaven? I can work remotely. My firm has been flexible since the pandemic. He ran a hand through his hair. I came back to settle my father's estate, but now there's Charlotte, Olivia finished. Yes. Thomas's eyes met hers. I'm not looking to disrupt her life, Olivia, but I want to be her father, not a weekend visitor or a summer vacation. Her father, the implications were overwhelming, co-parenting with a man who had every reason to resent her, explaining to Charlotte why her family had suddenly expanded, navigating the complex emotions that lingered between them. What do you propose? She finally asked. A transition period. Supervised visits at first, then more time together as she gets comfortable. Eventually, a formal custody arrangement. His voice grew firmer. And honesty from now on. Complete honesty. Olivia nodded slowly. That's fair, is it? Thomas stood abruptly, pacing in front of the fire. I don't think there's anything fair about this situation, but it's what we have, and Charlotte deserves parents who can work together despite the past. The maturity in his approach surprised her. The Thomas she'd known had been impulsive, quick to passion and equally quick to forgiveness. This measured response spoke of growth she hadn't witnessed. I agree, she said quietly. When would you like to start? Today, if possible. Olivia hesitated. That's very soon. I've already lost too much time, Thomas replied, an edge to his voice. Then, seeing her expression, he softened. But we'll follow Charlotte's lead. If she's not ready, we wait. They spent another hour outlining a tentative plan, a casual lunch today, where Thomas could begin building a relationship with his daughter. Then regular scheduled visits, building to overnight stays if all went well. As they prepared to leave, Thomas paused at the door. There's one more thing. I want her to have my name, not to replace yours. A hyphen, maybe. Olivia had anticipated this. Charlotte Hadley Russell. It has a nice ring to it. For the first time since they'd reunited, Thomas smiled genuinely. It does. That afternoon at Charlotte's favorite pizza place, Olivia watched her daughter peppering Thomas with questions about stars, about London, about whether he could draw cats. He couldn't, but promised to learn. Charlotte's initial shyness had dissolved quickly, replaced by a familiar curiosity that Thomas matched with patient answers and questions of his own. You're really my dad? Charlotte asked suddenly between bites of pepperoni pizza. Like forever? Thomas glanced at Olivia before answering. Yes, forever. Even when I was far away, I was still your dad. I just didn't know it yet. Charlotte considered this. So you didn't leave because you didn't want me? The innocent question stabbed Olivia with guilt, but Thomas answered without hesitation. Never. If I had known about you, I would have come back immediately. Charlotte nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. Because Lily's dad left and never came back, and she says it's because he didn't love her enough, but I told her that's stupid. It is stupid, Thomas agreed. And it's not true for Lily either. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that have nothing to do with their children. His eyes met Olivia's across the table, not accusatory, but understanding. In that moment, something shifted between them, a tentative bridge forming across the chasm of lost years. A new constellation winter settled over Millhaven, transforming the coastal town with frost that glittered on morning windows and occasional snow that hushed the streets by evening. 3 months had passed since the Harvest Festival, and with them, a gradual reshaping of 3 intertwined lives. Thomas had rented a small cottage 2 streets away from Olivia's house, close enough for impromptu visits, but far enough to maintain necessary boundaries. The interior slowly transformed from Spartan bachelor quarters to a home with touches of Charlotte's influence, her artwork on the refrigerator, a telescope by the back window, a bookshelf filled with titles they were reading together. On this particular evening, Charlotte was spending her first overnight weekend at Dad's house, a milestone they'd been building toward since October. Olivia found herself alone in a quiet home that felt simultaneously peaceful and empty. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, stargazing tonight if it stays clear. Charlotte insists you should join us. Olivia hesitated. They had been careful to maintain separate parenting time, allowing Charlotte to build individual relationships with each of them. But lately, their daughter had been orchestrating more moments together. Family dinners, weekend outings, now this. Are you sure? She texted back. The reply came quickly. It was her idea. But I think it's a good one. 2 hours later, the 3 of them stood in Thomas's backyard, breath fogging in the cold air as Thomas aligned the telescope toward the winter constellations. There's Orion, Charlotte declared, pointing upward. And the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. Very good, Thomas praised, adjusting the focus. Your mom taught you well. Actually, Olivia said quietly. She remembered from what you told me years ago. I just passed it along. Thomas looked at her with surprise. You remembered all that? Some things stay with you. She smiled faintly. Your enthusiasm was contagious. Charlotte, oblivious to the undercurrent between them, peered through the telescope. "I can see the colors. The red one and the blue one. Betelgeuse and Rigel," Thomas explained. "One's a red supergiant near the end of its life. The other's a blue-white star, much younger." "Like you and Mom," Charlotte said absently, still looking skyward. "Mom's warm like the red one, and you're all cool and blue." The adults exchanged glances, amused and slightly embarrassed by the child's perception. "Stars in the same constellation don't actually form together," Thomas said carefully. "They just look connected from our perspective on Earth. In reality, they're millions of light years apart." Charlotte finally looked up from the telescope. "But they still make pictures together, even if they're far apart." The wisdom in her observation silenced them both. Later, after hot chocolate and Charlotte's eventual surrender to sleep, Thomas and Olivia sat on the porch swing, a respectable distance between them as they watched the night sky. "She's adjusting well," Thomas said. "Better than I expected. She's resilient. And she adores you." Olivia pulled her blanket tighter against the chill. "You're good with her." "I'm trying." Thomas's voice held a hint of vulnerability. "There's so much to learn. I keep waiting to make some critical mistake." "Welcome to parenthood." Olivia laughed softly. "That feeling never quite goes away." They sat in companionable silence, rocking gently. The past months had worn smooth some of the jagged edges of their reunification. Legal discussions had given way to practical parenting concerns. Recriminations had gradually been replaced by cautious cooperation. "I've been offered a permanent position at the Millhaven branch," Thomas said suddenly. "I accepted today." Olivia turned to him, surprised. "What about London? Your career there?" "My priorities have changed," he shrugged. "And honestly, I've missed this place. The simplicity of it. Charlotte will be thrilled." "And you?" Thomas asked, his gaze direct. "How do you feel about me staying permanently?" The question contained layers: professional, parental, personal. Olivia considered each carefully. "I'm glad," she finally answered. "For Charlotte, definitely. But also," she hesitated, "it's been good seeing you with her, watching you become her father." "I've wondered sometimes," Thomas said slowly, "if things had been different, if I'd known about the pregnancy, if I'd stayed." "We can't rewrite the past," Olivia replied, though the same thoughts had haunted her over the years. "No, but we can write the future." Thomas's hand found hers on the swing between them. Not romantic, but purposeful. "I'm not suggesting we pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. But I think we're creating something new here. Something good for Charlotte." "A new constellation," Olivia said softly, thinking of their daughter's words. "Exactly," Thomas smiled. "Not what we planned, but maybe what we needed." Inside the house, Charlotte slept peacefully, unaware of the conversation on the porch. In her dreams, stars rearranged themselves into new patterns: a mother, a father, a child, connected by invisible lines of love and history and possibility. In the morning, Olivia would return to her house alone, and Charlotte would spend another day building memories with her father. But something had shifted this night, a recognition that their separate orbits had created a unique gravitational system, pulling them into a shared future none of them could have predicted. As the first snowflakes began to fall, Thomas and Olivia remained on the porch swing, watching the stars disappear behind clouds, comfortable in the silence that had once seemed impossible between them. The fractured reflections of their past were slowly reassembling into something unexpected. A family born not of convention but of choice, imperfect but genuine, navigating by stars only they could see.